Zo-277, Engels 2 Air Base, Saratov Oblast, Russian Federation. A Tu-95 MS Bear bomber rolls to the end of the runway. Its 4 turboprop engines scream at full power. Under its wings hang 8 Kh-101 cruise missiles. In 2022, that same aircraft would have carried 12. In early 2023, the Salvos from Engels 2 averaged 60 to 80 missiles across an entire launch wave. Tonight, according to Ukrainian Air Force reporting, the entire wave is 19. That number is the story. Bore retention got point. 0. 30 hook resolution Ts. Russia still has the bombers. Russia still has the runways. What Russia is running short of, according to Western intelligence assessments, open source production tracking, and Ukrainian general staff briefings compiled through the spring of 2026, is the thing that goes under the wings. The Kh-101 cruise missile, the weapon that costs roughly $3 million per round to manufacture. The weapon that sanctions, drone strikes on production facilities, and a microchip shortage have throttled to a fraction of its pre-war output. Here is how that shortage happened, what it looks like from the Ukrainian side of the front line, and why a falling number on a salvo-size chart may be one of the most consequential data points of this entire war. The Kh-101 is not a simple weapon. It is a precision long-range air-launched cruise missile with an estimated range of 2,500 to 3,000 kilometers, depending on the flight profile. Its warhead carries approximately 400 kilograms of explosives. It navigates via terrain contour matching, GPS, and optical scene correlation, a guidance package that requires Western standard microelectronics to function at the tolerances Russia's military demands. Specifically, processors, field programmable gate arrays, and inertial measurement units that Russia did not produce domestically in sufficient quantity before February 2022 and has been unable to reliably source since sanctions locked down export pipelines. Open-source investigators tracing components recovered from downsells found chips manufactured in the United States, the Netherlands, Japan, and South Korea, not Russian chips. Western chips, sourced through third-party brokers, through shell companies in the UAE and Turkey and Central Asia, through a sanctions evasion infrastructure that Western intelligence agencies have been systematically dismantling since 2023. Mar retention notch point. 4 stakes bend. The sanctions story is only part of it. The production was also being strangled on the ground. The Dubna machine building plant, the Raduga Design Bureau facility in Dubna, the Euroworks of Civil Aviation in Yekaterinburg. These are not abstract names on a sanctions list. Open-source analysts tracking satellite imagery of these facilities through 2025 documented changes in production tempo, reduced vehicle traffic, altered shift patterns, material stockpiles that stopped growing. And then, beginning in the fall of 2024 and accelerating through 2025, something else started hitting these facilities directly: Ukrainian long-range strike drones. Specifically, a family of domestically developed one-way attack drones with ranges reportedly exceeding 1,000 kilometers. Aircraft that Ukraine's defense, industry, and its Western partners built, refined, and deployed in growing numbers through 2024 and into 2025. These are not the commercial quadcopters that dominate the frontline footage from Donetsk. These are purpose-built weapons, subsonic, low observable by radar cross-section, capable of navigating to a fixed GPS coordinate and detonating on impact. Ukraine's government has been selectively acknowledging these strikes. Russia has been selectively denying them. The damage, recorded in satellite imagery analyzed by Western research institutions and open-source intelligence communities, is closer to Ukraine's version. I spent time going through the OSINT documentation compiled across 2025 and into early 2026, and one pattern kept surfacing. The strikes were not random. They followed a logic, hitting not just end product storage but production inputs, warehouses holding component assemblies, transformer substations serving manufacturing floors, rail junctions moving finished weapons from factory to airbase. This was not shock and awe. It was supply chain warfare conducted slowly, methodically, from range. The first confirmed major strike wave targeting Kh-101 production infrastructure came in October 2024. Ukrainian sources reported hitting a facility in the Saratov region, close enough to Engels 2 that Russian air defense around the bomber base was already on elevated alert. The strike, according to Ukrainian General Staff reporting, targeted a storage and maintenance facility for air-launched munitions. Russia's defense ministry acknowledged an attack. Russian state media showed footage of fires. What burned and how much of it remains disputed. But satellite imagery reviewed by Western analysts showed structural damage consistent with a significant secondary explosion, the kind produced when stored energetic materials ignite. Retention caught point. 50% mid-roll hook. Here is the question that determines everything that follows. If Russia's Kh-101 stocks were already at 60% of pre-war levels, as Western intelligence assessments, cited by multiple European defense ministries, suggested by the end of 2025, what does a strike on storage infrastructure actually accomplish? The answer is compounding. A weapon destroyed in storage cannot be used. A weapon that cannot be used is a salvo slot that disappears. And a salvo that drops from 60 missiles to 19 is one that Ukraine's air defense can handle with assets it actually has, rather than the assets it wishes it had. This is the arithmetic of attrition. By the spring of 2026, that arithmetic was running in Ukraine's direction. Consider the trajectory. Ukraine's Air Force and the independent monitoring organization MOLFAR, which tracks Russian missile and drone strikes in near real time, have documented the following pattern in Kh-101 salvo sizes since 2022. In the major waves of late 2022 and through 2023, Russia regularly launched 50 to 80 Kh-101 missiles in a single strike wave, often combined with Shahed-136 and Shahed-131 one-way attack drones to saturate air defenses. By mid-2024, the largest documented Kh-101 salvos had dropped to the 30s and 40s. By the fourth quarter of 2025, Ukrainian Air Force briefings were reporting Kh-101 components within strike waves of fewer than 25 missiles. The December 2025 wave, a major strike targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure ahead of the winter heating peak, included, according to Ukrainian General Staff, 17 Kh-101 missiles, alongside a much larger Shahed component. Russia was substituting cheap drones for expensive precision weapons. That substitution tells the story by itself. Here's what this tells us about the shape of the war as it enters its fifth year. Russia entered 2022 assuming that precision long-range strike could break Ukrainian civilian morale and disable the infrastructure sustaining military operations. That assumption required a stockpile depth Russia did not possess, and it required a production line capable of replacing what was fired, one that sanctions and strikes have demonstrably degraded. The strategic bet failed. Not dramatically, not in a single turning point moment, but through the accumulation of launched missiles that were not replaced, production capacity that was hit and not rebuilt, microchips that sanctions prevented from reaching assembly floors. This will generate pushback, but the Western sanctions architecture that looked slow and porous in 2022 and 23 is showing measurable effects by 2026. Not through embargo-induced collapse, but through the quieter mechanism of forcing Russia to substitute inferior components, slow production lines, and deplete stocks faster than they are rebuilt. The effect is not visible in a single news cycle. It shows up in salvo-sized charts tracked quarter by quarter. Back to Engels 2. The Tu-95 MS has reached cruise altitude, still over Russian territory, outside the effective range of Ukrainian air defense. At the designated launch point, the weapon release sequence begins. 8 Kh-101 missiles drop from their pylons, their turbofan engines ignite, and they begin the long subsonic flight southwest. The bomber turns back toward Engels 2. Its crew will land, debrief, and wait for the next mission. What determines when that next mission happens is not their readiness or their training. It is how many missiles are available to hang under the wings. Meanwhile, approximately 1,800 kilometers to the southwest, Ukraine's air defense network has been tracking the launch signatures for the past several minutes. The detection pipeline runs through multiple sensor layers: ground-based radar, airborne early warning assets operated by NATO partners over Romanian and Polish airspace passing data through liaison channels, and a dense network of civilian acoustic and visual observers who report via a national monitoring application in near real time. By the time the first Kh-101 crosses into Ukrainian airspace, its approximate track is already plotted and interceptor assets are being queued. Ukraine's primary interceptor for Kh-101 threats is the Patriot PAC-3 system, of which Ukraine had received multiple batteries from the United States, Germany, and the Netherlands through 2024 and 2025. The Patriot PAC-3 MSE interceptor carries a hit-to-kill kinetic warhead optimized against maneuvering ballistic and cruise missile targets. Its engagement envelope against a Kh-101 flying a terrain-hugging profile is not unlimited. The missile's low altitude and terrain's masking can complicate radar acquisition. But against salvos of fewer than 20 missiles, a Patriot battery with full interceptor loadout has the depth to engage multiple targets sequentially. That math was different when Russia was launching 60 missiles at a time. It is different now. What would you do if you were running Ukrainian air defense planning tonight? The salvo is smaller. The interceptors are fewer but sufficient. The calculation has changed, but has it changed enough to confidently stand down secondary assets and preserve interceptor inventory for the next wave? That is the real-time decision being made by Ukrainian air defense commanders, with lives and infrastructure on the line. Comment below, would you accept that trade or keep every ATA active regardless of salvo size? The raid proceeds inbound. Ukrainian Air Force reporting, released in the hours after the engagement, states that 14 of the 17 Kh-101 missiles in this wave were intercepted. 3 reached their intended target area. 2 struck energy infrastructure in the Kharkiv region. 1 struck a transmission substation. Ukrainian state energy operator DTEK reported temporary outages affecting several districts. Repair crews were deployed within hours. The damage, while real, was not the kind of cascading infrastructure collapse that Russia's large salvos achieved in 2022 and early 2023. The grid, heavily hardened and dispersed through 2 years of repair and investment in mobile generation and backup capacity, absorbed the blow. 3 missiles reached their targets. 14 did not. That roughly 80% intercept rate is consistent with what Ukraine's Air Force has been reporting for strikes of this size since the 4th quarter of 2025. Here is the number that closes the loop on why salvo size matters so much. A Patriot PAC-3 MSE interceptor costs approximately $4 million. A Kh-101 costs approximately $3 million. When Russia fires a cruise missile that Ukraine intercepts with a Patriot, the exchange ratio is slightly unfavorable to Ukraine by unit cost. When Russia fires 60 cruise missiles and Ukraine intercepts 45, Russia has spent $180 million to put 15 missiles on target and has expended irreplaceable inventory at a rate production lines cannot match. When Russia fires 17 cruise missiles and Ukraine intercepts 14, Russia has spent approximately $51 million to put 3 missiles on target. The per-strike cost of damage inflicted has risen dramatically as salvo size has fallen, because the fixed overhead, mission planning, aircrew hours, fuel risk to aircraft, remains constant regardless of how many missiles are under the wings. One detail that stuck with me in reviewing the production data. Russia's Raduga Design Bureau reportedly attempted to accelerate Kh-101 production in 2023 by simplifying the guidance package, substituting domestically available components for Western electronics in certain subsystems. Western analysts examining Kh-101 performance in 2024 and 2025 noted an apparent increase in mid-course failures and terminal accuracy degradation in some missiles consistent with guidance system substitution. Russia cannot simply source more Western microchips. The domestic alternative exists but is demonstrably inferior. The missile flies. Sometimes it flies off course. Sometimes it does not reach the target. The data is noisy. A single missile failure could be explained by Ukrainian electronic warfare jamming, or by a component deficiency, or both. But the pattern across dozens of observed failures is consistent enough that Western analysts treat guidance degradation as a real and growing factor. Here's where the story goes somewhere Russian planners did not anticipate in 2022. The drone strikes on production infrastructure are not just reducing the number of missiles, they may be degrading the quality of the missiles that do get produced, as supply chain disruptions force component substitution and workarounds that erode performance. A missile that flies off course is not merely a missed target. It is $3 million of inventory destroyed for zero military effect. That cost lands on a production system already under pressure. Subscribe to Silent Echo. We track these numbers, these production trends, and these frontline engagement patterns, updated every week with the latest open-source intelligence. Retention count point, last 60s payoff. By June 2026, open-source tracking of Russian missile strike patterns suggests the overall Kh-101 inventory picture has not improved since the assessments of late 2025. Western analysts estimate that Russia's combined cruise missile production across all types, Kh-101, Kh-555, caliber, remains below the rate of expenditure in high-intensity strike periods. Russia has compensated by increasing Shahed drone production, sourcing additional Shahed variants and components from Iran, and deploying a newer family of domestically produced decoy drones designed to saturate Ukrainian air defense radar. These adaptations are real and have complicated Ukrainian intercept operations. But they are adaptations, responses to a strategic deficit, not solutions to it. The Tu-95 fleet at Engels 2 remains operational. Russia has not lost its bombers to Ukrainian strikes, despite repeated attempts to reach Engels 2 with long-range drones, attempts that have achieved mixed results and that Russia has invested heavily in defending against. The aircraft are there, the runways are there, the fuel is there. What is diminishing quarter by quarter, salvo by salvo, is the thing that makes the Tu-95 operationally relevant. The precision long-range munition that justifies putting a 4-turboprop Cold War airframe into a modern air campaign. If you track this war seriously, you already see the pattern. The strategic logic that makes long-range precision strike decisive, the ability to strike infrastructure faster than it can be repaired, with enough simultaneous hits to overwhelm both physical redundancy and defensive intercept capacity, requires volume. Volume requires production. Production requires components. Components require either a domestic supply chain that Russia lacks, or access to global markets that sanctions have made increasingly costly and unreliable. The bomber fleet is the visible part of this system. The invisible part, the microchip supply chain, the production hall in Dubna, the rail junction connecting factory to airbase, is where the real constraint lives. The question that determines whether this trend continues or reverses is whether Russia's sanctions evasion network can rebuild component supply pipelines faster than Western enforcement agencies can disrupt them. That is an intelligence and enforcement competition happening right now across dozens of jurisdictions. The Salvos size chart is the scorecard. Through June 2026, it shows continued constraint on Russian long-range precision strike capacity. Russia still has bombers. Russia still has runways. Russia increasingly does not have enough things to put under the wings. What do you think? Is the combination of sanctions and targeted strikes on production infrastructure more decisive than the frontline fighting? Or does that understate what the ground war is actually determining? Drop your take in the comments. We read every one. Will this production constraint translate into a decisive operational shift before Russia finds a way to rebuild inventory? Comment yes or no. This is the question the next 12 months will answer. For more on how Ukraine's long-range strike campaign has reshaped the strategic picture, including the drone strikes on Russian oil refinery, infrastructure that have run parallel to the missile factory targeting, that video is next.